Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I am so pleased to have this chance to speak in support of C-8, an act to amend the Citizenship Act, Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's call to action number 94. I want to start by telling you a story about one of the best, most Canadian, most Albertan moments I ever witnessed. The event took place in April of 2016, as Canada was in the midst of accepting hundreds of Syrian refugees. The Edmonton Mennonite Centre for Newcomers, which does a lot of refugee settlement work in Alberta, was hosting a dinner event to honor the families and community groups that were acting as private sponsors, and to welcome some of the Syrian refugee families who had been resettled in Edmonton. The dinner took place in the Portuguese Canadian Cultural Centre, and the halal food was donated by local chefs. It included Italian, South Asian, and French dishes, as well as shawarma and fatir and baklava. A multicultural choir sang in English, Swahili, Tagalog, and Arabic. But the highlight of the evening was an honor song and a series of performances from the singers, drummers, and dancers of the Thundering Spirit drum group. Lonnie Potts, one of the leaders of Thundering Spirit, spoke to the newcomers in both Cree and English. "Just open your ears and feel the song," he told his audience with the help of an Arabic interpreter. "We understand that you come from hardship. May you come here and find comfort and solace among our people." It was one of the most remarkable moments I'd ever witnessed. So many different members of the Treaty 6 community gathered together, with First Nations leaders and artists giving a formal and joyous welcome to refugees who had only just arrived. The symbolism was so powerful and so critical. A chance for these Syrian newcomers to understand the deep roots and history of the country where they were about to join. A chance for the Indigenous performers to feel not just seen and respected, but to feel themselves as integral to the refugee settlement process. I took a moment to speak with Mr. Potts after his group's performance was over. Perhaps I could ask Senator Patterson to turn off his microphone if that's not too much of a bother.
Sorry.
I took a moment to speak to Mr. Potts after his group's performance was over. He told me what a connection he felt with the displaced Syrians. He talked about the parallels between his own community's experience and the experience of the refugees. His welcome to them was heartfelt and rooted in a deep sense of empathy. Later, I chatted with one of the Syrian refugees, a young man named Basil Abu Marah. He was Druze, and he and his family had fled their home near Damascus after their house was destroyed by shelling. He had been profoundly moved by the performance of Thundering Spirit. "When I hear them, they take me to another world," he told me. "It's amazing." I still think back to how important that was, that the first impression all these newcomers had of Indigenous people was so positive, so celebratory, so joyous, so numinous. And that's why I think this bill is so important too. As Senator Almedvar noted this week, there can often be a disconnect between new Canadians and First Canadians. If we are being frankly, uncomfortably honest, we need to acknowledge that it's all too easy for new immigrants and refugees to absorb ambient racist prejudices and fears about their Indigenous neighbors, and for Indigenous people to sometimes feel equally suspicious of newcomers. That can be especially true in lower income neighborhoods where the two communities may be in competition for jobs and social resources. Adding recognition of treaties and of Aboriginal constitutional rights to the Citizenship Oath is an important step. It is a profoundly important symbolic gesture, one that properly centers the importance of treaties in the development of this country, one that pledges every new citizen to upholding the honor of the Crown, not just offering allegiance to the Crown. It is a powerful reminder that most all of us are settlers here, whether our families arrived in 1815 or 1915 or 2015. A testament to the fact that treaties are living documents as relevant today and tomorrow as they were whether they were signed a century or a decade ago. The revised oath is a guarantee that new generations of new Canadians will be encouraged, indeed required, to learn about the Indigenous rights in the Constitution and why those rights are relevant to them, too. Changing the citizenship oath is a start. If I might suggest, the people who organize citizenship ceremonies might want to take that inspiration one further. I've had the pleasure and privilege of attending a good number of citizenship ceremonies in my time, sometimes as a journalist, more often as a friend, welcoming people I care for into the Canadian family. And it must be said that though the swearing-ins are meaningful for those who participate and for those who love them, The events themselves are a bit dull and bureaucratic. There is no music, there is no poetry, there is no sense of the numinous. It is not a ceremony of transformation, not of the solemn transformation that it represents. My colleague Senator Cormier, a man of the theater, has argued that it might be valuable to add something more to the ceremony, perhaps to ask local elders or drummers to take part, not just on an occasional basis, as Minister Mendocino described to us today, but as a routine or requisite part of the proceedings. To start or end a citizenship ceremony with something meaningful or beautiful from the culture of the specific local indigenous communities of the region where a swearing in takes place, be that a prayer, a dance, a song, a smudge. That's not something to put into a piece of legislation. It's just an inspiration to drop into the ears of those who put together the events. But adding some words to the oath, even adding some indigenous cultural elements to the ceremony, isn't nearly enough. We need cultural and community leaders who are building and tending relationships between First Nations and new Canadians. I'm proud to say that my hometown of Edmonton has been excelling in this regard. I want to boast, for example, about the unique partnerships that the Bent Arrow Traditional Healing Society, one of the city's leading Indigenous community support groups, has forged with the Edmonton Mennonite Centre for Newcomers, and also with Islamic Relief Canada, the Muslim Association of Canada Edmonton, and the Islamic Family and Social Services Association. Together, they offer joint programming to their client communities and welcoming ceremonies for new immigrants. Before COVID-19, sometimes that meant sending drummers, dancers, and singers to the airport in Edmonton to greet new arrivals. During COVID-19, Bent Arrow staff have been recording prayers and welcome songs in Cree to be played for new arrivals. So far, people are really just planting seeds, but as every gardener or farmer knows, you have to start with seeds before you can harvest. Sustaining meaningful, lasting relationships takes time, but those are the relationships we need to grow and tend as we move forward. Sadly, much of what connects immigrant and Indigenous communities is a shared experience of economic and social injustice and of raw racism. This Sunday, 4 members of the Afzaal family from London, Ontario, were killed when they were run down as they took an evening walk. Police have charged a 20-year-old man, Nathaniel Veltman, and have alleged that he was motivated by racial and religious bigotry. They allege indeed that this was a targeted hate crime. The very next day, indeed the day the story of what happened in London broke, Braden Bushby, a 22-year-old man from Thunder Bay, was sentenced to 8 years for manslaughter in the death of an Indigenous woman, 34-year-old Barbara Kentner. She died after Bushby hurled a heavy trailer hitch at her as she walked along the road. How horrific. How surreal that the simple act of taking a walk in Canada should be something provocative enough to incite a lethal attack, a mindlessly malicious and fundamentally cowardly assault launched from the safety and security of a vehicle. The fact that Indigenous and immigrant Canadians should be united by being the victims of racism is a telling indictment of this country we love. But an alliance based on discrimination isn't the strong foundation we want for healthy, positive, forward-looking relationships. What we really need to support and incent are strong alliances of political, social, and economic opportunity, where new Canadians and First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Canadians pool their talent, their entrepreneurial drive, their artistry, their strategic savvy, their professional and technical skill to come up with business opportunities, artistic creations, inventions, research projects, political movements that will propel our country towards a better future. Such alliances, grounded in mutual respect and understanding, should be the bedrock of the Canada we want to share. So no, the words of a citizenship oath are not a magical incantation. They won't instantly transport us to some better place. But an oath is always a promise, and an oath is a pact. It is a vow to be honored, or all honor is lost. Would that we could all take such oaths as Canadians to honor our treaty and constitutional obligations. I'll leave you with one more story tonight, if I may. Almost a decade ago, I had the joy and the honor of spending a day at St. Francis of Assisi Elementary School in North Edmonton. The school had a unique demographic catchment. Roughly 40% of the kids at the school at that time were refugees or the children of refugees from South Sudan, whose families had fled a land ravaged by civil war. About 55% were First Nations kids who were part of the school's popular Cree bilingual program. But the principal faced a dilemma. The student body was so divided. There were two distinct streams at the school. The Cree bilingual students had very few classes with the South Sudanese classmates. There were tensions in the hallways and on the playground. So the principal, her name was Catherine Decker, made a pretty radical choice. She brought the kids together. The day I visited, a member of the award-winning Indigenous singing group Asani was visiting the school to teach a special music class to all the grade 4 and 5 students, all the kids together, learning to drum and to sing a song in Cree, all learning and all celebrating the deep history of their shared community. No matter what culture it is, we allow kids to come into this school, one eager 9-year-old boy told me. Being friends with everyone is a good deed, and you get to feel good inside. Those grade 4 and 5 students I met that day would be about 18 today, coming of age, stepping up to lead in a country that has yet to learn to keep its own promises, but we've not quite found the courage to be friends with everyone. When we do, well, maybe we'll feel good inside too. Thank you, merci, and hi hi.